You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. Hello and welcome to episode 287 of the Meet the Farmers podcast. I'm your host, Ben Eagle. We're in Wales today, and my guest is James Raw, a seventh generation farmer who runs a hill farm in the heart of the Cambrian Mountains. James has implemented a range of sustainable practices and projects at his farm, including the creation of 2 hydro systems and a farming system that focuses on soil health and biodiversity. He was awarded the prestigious Low Impact Award in the annual M&S Select Farm Awards for England and Wales last year. Today, we're going to talk about his farming journey, the changes that he's enacted on his farm, and some trends and issues in farming. James, welcome to Meet the Farmers.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben.
So, you are a 7th generation farmer. It goes back quite a way, your farming line. So, I wonder if you can just start by telling us a little bit about the family's history on the farm and the beginning of your farming journey as well.
Yeah, from a personal point of view, I was brought up on the farm here, and we were studied at Harper Adams between 94 and 98. And I actually had to leave halfway through the final year because my father, he became ill. So I came home to farm, and then from there, farmed in partnership with him for about 4 years before he passed away. So then from that point, I've managed in the partnership with my mother then. In about 2004, we got married to Claire, and we've got an 18-year-old son. Hopefully the next generation to come through. The farm itself, it's a quite a large hill farm, and we've got about 300 acres of lowland ground, and they both complement each other quite well. We've been within the environmental schemes for about 40 years, and it's benefited both the environment and also the farm business itself. The family first came down here about 200 years ago from North Yorkshire. And my great-great-great-grandfather, he was a farmer, and he was mining from quite a young age, about nine years old. And he was brought down to be captain of the mines here at Cwm Ystwyth. There's a really kind of interesting document that we've got. It's quite an early health and safety document from about 1863, where he's interviewed and just gives records of how healthy the men were within the mines, what they were doing. There's early reference to water wheels being used to blow air to clean the air out in the mine itself. And I guess then there's a lot of comparison between the health of the miners and the local people who worked in agriculture. Moving on then, through the generations, my grandfather put in a small hydroelectric scheme on the farm. That was back in about 1950s. And so we've always known that there's a kind of potential for hydroelectric on the farm. The farming system itself, it's based on Welsh hill ewes. Back when I came home 20 years ago, we were running about 3,500 ewes and about 1,000 replacements. But within the environmental schemes and using the headage, those numbers are down to about kind of 850, 900 ewes at the moment. But what we've seen is back then where we had a lambing percentage of about 105 with lambs out on the hill, the lambing percentage now has risen to about 150. So when you take into consideration that we only keep about 250 replacements, the number of lambs actually sold is relatively similar. We also keep about 35 pure limousine herd of suckler cows. and they work really well as the sheep return to the hill over the winter months, and then we're able then to keep fodder and bring those on. So we sell store cattle at about 14, 16 months of age. It's usually kind of autumn calving. It's nice to be selling cattle at this stage of the year.
Taking you back when you first came back to the farm, I suppose. I mean, when that happened and your father unfortunately being ill, did you always think that you're going to go back to the farm straight away, or did you think you might go somewhere else first?
We didn't really have any concrete plans. It possibly would have been nice to have some experience. I did have a year out of the agriculture course working on a dairy and arable farm, and it's really good to have that insight into different sectors. The plan was always to come home. What I would have done, yeah, I'm not sure, but it was really nice to come home and just carry on from there.
Give us a flavour as well of the local environment as well, farming culture locally, and how that has changed over time as well.
It's quite a sparsely populated area, with agriculture being one of the main sectors. I suppose the community, there's far less people working on the farms these days. We're lucky to have full-time member of staff. Sean, he's been with us for about 20 years, and he's a real asset to the farming enterprise. Compared to, you've only got to look back. When I came home, shearing day, there would have been probably about 20 to 30 staff, kind of shearers, helpers, family members. And I think by now, just with simplifying systems, there's probably only about 6 or 7 of us.
Okay.
So it does have quite a large effect on the numbers of people involved in agriculture, I guess.
Mm, no, exactly, and that's certainly a topic that is on everyone's minds at the moment. Certainly, a lot of people talking about succession. I mean, just when I know we're jumping about a bit, but how have you been tackling that as a family?
To be fair, that's one thing Mum has never been afraid to approach. I've got a sister, and she's always had part of the farm. Everybody's known that. But all that planning now with the inheritance tax review has just been blown straight out of the water. There's massive uncertainty, and it is quite a worry. And not only for the older generation, if something would happen to myself or Claire, that's a big worry in itself. And I feel over the years, you feel as though you've always been progressive. You've been told to diversify. So we've got a holiday cottage here on the farm, even though it's kind of mostly Claire's domain on Friday changeover. Everybody has to pitch in with kind of their own jobs. Mum has developed the outbuildings on the farm where she lives. So there's about 8 residential kind of two person units there. And it's almost as though you're being punished for what you've done. And it just gives very little incentive to expand and improve and take things forward, really. It can't quite fathom what the thought behind it is, really.
So, James, I want to reflect on your hydro system, and this stretches back to your grandfather, who first started doing this in the 1950s. But tell us more about where it is now, how that's developed, and your plans going forward. But also, I suppose, why this might be of interest to other farmers in similar areas who perhaps aren't engaging with this.
I guess with us, it was the introduction of the feed-in tariffs back in 2010. We always knew there was a potential here. So it was either a case of taking a 30 kilowatt scheme on single phase, or developing two separate schemes, 100 kilowatts each. And then by doing that, we'd have to upgrade the 3 phase about 2 miles up to the farm. So then it was a far larger development. So basically, we've got two completely separate schemes. We've got one high head running about a mile of 315 mil pipe. And there's about 210 meters of drop from the start to the bottom. And
Wow.
it needs about 60 liters per second to achieve full capacity. And with the other scheme, it's about 45 meters of drop. Because of that, we need 5 times the volume of water. So we need it's somewhere in the region of about 350 liters per second. So that scheme is actually undersized. So it does produce about 50% more water. But with hydroelectric schemes, the smaller the pipe, the cheaper it is to construct. The high head is definitely way cheaper. But it's without the feed-in tariffs, without that support. It's a massive outlay from the onset. And without that help, that's the main stumbling block, I guess.
I was going to say, I mean, without that, what would I mean, it obviously depends on the scheme, but what would the rough payback be?
The payback is probably 12 years roughly. Some things to be aware of. We are paying business rates. The business rates are quite hefty on them. And then, of course, borrowing money over that period of time, you're probably paying 1.5 times what you borrowed. Yeah, but it probably, yes, 12-year rough payback on them.
What's motivated you to continue innovating the way that you farmed? Because in some ways, it's like if you look at sort of innovating practices, there's a lot of change that's happening at the moment. But how did you set out on the path that you wanted to set out on?
I guess we just had, is ethos the right word, but just to make the most of what we've got on the farm. So we've got a number of kind of natural resources and just trying to make the most of what we can on the farm. I guess also because there's only two of us with kind of few different types of farming and businesses, we do try to keep the systems relatively simple and straightforward as possible. As for the hydro, I think that was slightly different kettle of fish. Once we got into it, it kind of drew you in and then to almost the point of no return.
Yeah.
Having invested so much time, effort, and money into it, it was just only one way forward with it, really.
Switching to soil health, and I suppose, I mean, we've talked actually in recent weeks with farmers in other parts of the country and up in Scotland in particular on managing hill land and managing soil health when you're looking at your grazing. What role does, I suppose, a focus on soil health play in your farming system?
We do tend to keep the inputs relatively low. We make sure that the lime level and obviously the P's and K's are quite consistent and where they should be. Most of the hill land is actually peat bogs. So we've probably got several hundred hectares of peat bogs. So there is little we can do to affect the actual soil health of the peat bogs. We've just started a project. Half of the hill is actually on the Inland Valley Water Estates. So they're running projects now to manage and to look at peat depths and what we can do to manage that peat area.
What support is available for that work?
Well, at the moment, it should be coming out within the SFS scheme, the new scheme. So what that support will be, who knows? We're just at the moment, we're just monitoring and trying to get a better understanding of how much peat there are, where the actual locations that can be improved, the locations where there is a certain amount of bare peat and that is losing, and then what can be done about it, really.
Your thoughts on regenerative agriculture, both as a term? I mean, it's definitely, I think it's almost the buzzword in farming right now. Some people embrace it almost as a religion. Some people don't like the term so much. Some people believe it's being commercialized too much and almost taken out of farmers' hands. How do you define it and what does it mean in practice for you?
I guess to be fair to the farmers that are on the regenerative path, I guess we see ourselves more of sustainable, trying to balance that environmental work with producing beef and cattle. And to be honest, we probably haven't gone that one step further to looking at deeply at the soil, looking at the insects and probably crop rotations within the system that kind of encompasses regenerative farming. So to me, is it the next step forward? We'll see. We'll see. We have grown a certain amount of crops down at the lowland farm in a rotation. The crop itself works quite well, but the one thing we found farming on this side of the Cabria Mountains was just trying to get that that dry spell in September can be really challenging compared to as you go over the hills into England.
Yeah.
The rainfall here is substantially higher.
As you've reduced your stocking numbers, I'm interested in the impact that that's had on the way you're managing the sheep, but also maybe the impact it's had on you as a business, both in terms of the financials and resilience of that, but also as a team as well as a workforce.
Um, it's definitely made things far easier on many different levels. To begin with, I don't think back 20 years ago, finding winter keep was far easier than it is these days. These days, yeah, it's just almost impossible. To be fair to most of the dairy farmers, first that first bite and coming out of spring is almost as important as later on. So, having dropped the stock numbers, we're in a fortunate position at the moment that we're able to keep all the stock on farm all the way through the winter. And then we do actually rent about 80 acres out to a local dairy farmer for them to graze and take crop silage off during the summer months on one unit. It does make everything far simpler and a lot less headache with all the paperwork. And financially, yeah, I'm sure it's no longer even though the stock prices are selling really, really well, it isn't a numbers game as it was years ago.
Now, you were, as I mentioned in the intro, you were awarded the Low Impact Award in the M&S Select Farm Awards. So I'm just really interested in is what they were looking for with that and what that meant for you as a business.
Again, I think it was to do with what we've done here. We've tried to combine the environmental benefits with production. We've probably planted about 3 to 4 kilometers of hedgerows. We've created new streamside corridors, created small new woodlands on pieces of lower input ground. We also use quite a bit of our own larch to fencing. We've also cladded the outside the holiday cottage on one side with it. The hydroelectric itself produces enough for about 250 homes. So I think it's a combination of all of them, really.
How confident are you about the future of farming in Wales? And from your point of view, and this could be, I suppose, from your farm point of view, but what would you say is your biggest concern, but also your biggest hope for farming in your region?
I can honestly see almost kind of two philosophies with this new SFS. There are going to be intensive farms that are not going to take it up, and they are going to be purely production based. And then you have then the farms that will take it up, and yeah, we'll find some kind of balance between production and the environment. But on the flip side, we'll probably be spending quarter of our time filling in forms and doing paperwork. And that is it's a sad truth. The opportunities, I mean, with the domestic and the world supply of red meat, the prices that there's massive undersupply. So, the red meat sector for the short term will remain buoyant,
Yeah.
and I think that hopefully will see us through the next few years of transition into the SFS.
I mean, certainly if we zoom in on the red meat market. And actually, in terms of current prices, as you've alluded to, there is definitely some positive there for sheep and beef farmers to take out. And dare I say, it's a good thing at the moment to actually have that positive. But as we know, markets go up and down. So, I mean, if we're thinking of balancing schemes like the SFS, and I'm going to use the word reliance, I suppose, on those schemes in order to help your cash flow, yes, but also round your business overall. Do you think Welsh farmers are over reliant on government schemes?
Yeah, over the years, it has always been a support mechanism for production. And within the environmental schemes, it's always been if you do this, there's income forgone. So that reliance is has been kind of put on us by cutting back stock, by changing our systems as we were told to do. Moving forward, even though even though the price of stock, unless you are in a quite an intensive sector, I still see the continued government support as being essential for a lot of the smaller family farms. I see a lot of my friends now probably only working part time on the farms, and having other jobs and having other work to supplement it. I guess in some way, what we've done here with the hydro, that in some way has that is our kind of financial resilience to some way. But it is quite scary to think if we can move forward that, without those payments.
What's next for you as a business? Have you got any upcoming projects or anything you're working towards?
Um, Kind of, it is really just trying to weather this storm, and then just trying to put ourselves in a better position after the borrowing we've done with the hydro. Um, the peatland work on the hills is probably the next thing that we'll seriously have to look into. And also, we've got a potential for just a micro hydro, just a small scheme, just to power the holiday cottage, because there's 100 meters of fall. So we can do that by using a really small amount of water. And yeah, hopefully we'll see how it get on. But it probably does have, back in, I think, when my grandfather put the hydro scheme in the 1950s, 60s, there would have been hundreds of hydro schemes within the county. But due to kind of, yeah, different reasons, that is no longer the case. But that potential is still there.
We are going to start to round it up, and I always finish with the same two questions for each guest, which I'll ask you now. The first, James, if you had a message for the public, any message at the moment, what would it be?
I guess we are producing, in my mind, the best produce, the best red meat in the world, to the highest environmental and welfare standards. I think there's always room for improvement, and as an industry, I'm sure we'll do that.
And your message for farmers?
Given everything that's going on, it is quite simply just to stay positive, and just hopefully we can weather this storm, and come out on the other side in a better place. And I guess also, I should say, for my Welsh rugby supporters, there's about 8 weeks until the Lions tour. So that's a real positive. Hopefully we can have a few wins in the red shirt with the Lions.
Yeah, the ups and downs of farming, the ups and downs of rugby as well. Things come around. So we will leave it there. James, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
A massive thank you to my guest, James Raw, for coming on the show. And thank you also for listening. I hope you can join me next time. But for now, I'm Ben Eagle. This has been Meet the Farmers. And thank you very much for listening.